Welcome to the Data Strategy Show. My name's Samir Sharma and I'll be your host for the next 60 minutes. My guest today is Andrew Wright. Andrew manages the Walt Disney World's commercial strategy data science team. In his 14 years with the company, he has also supported marketing and operations analytics. Prior to joining Disney, Andrew worked in financial services and consulting firms, where he learned the value of performance storytelling backed with data. He has been selected to present at several Disney data and analytics conferences and is often invited to speak to corporate and non-profit organizations about the value of analytics. Holding an undergraduate degree in foreign affairs, as well as an MBA and Master of Applied Science, Andrew enjoys finding non-obvious solutions for businesses' biggest decision-making challenges. I hope you enjoy this episode, and please do like, share, and leave your feedback. Thank you for listening. Welcome, Andrew Wright, to the Data Strategy Show. It's really fantastic to have you here. Andrew, why don't you just say hello to everybody?
Sure. Well, thanks for having me, Samir. Andrew Wright, working with Disney as a senior data scientist, focusing on commercial endeavors, and I'm super excited to get to talk to you today, Samir.
That's great. No, and thank you for being my guest today. It's we talked about this pre-Christmas, and we're finally here. So it's really great. And what I always like to start with is Andrew, tell me a little bit about yourself, your journey, through data, obviously at about 30,000 feet, and then we'll get straight into it.
Yeah, sure. So right now, I currently I've been 14 years at Walt Disney Parks. Current segment name is Disney Parks Experience and Products. So we're continuing to bolt on other businesses to our responsibilities. But I started my sort of data career while I was in college. I was working on a foreign affairs, so a political science type of career. But I had I had sort of a night job where I was doing some data entry for a financial publishing firm. And I started to, within that particular position, both while I was working part-time and then they offered me a position as I came out of college, learning that data has power. And as I've moved through my career there and in subsequent positions, I've also learned that storytelling with data, or being able to tell a compelling story derived from data or defended by data, has enormous influence on the people who are running our organizations, running our charities, running our philanthropic organizations. And people who can do this type of work and do it well are very rare. And so I've tried to position myself professionally as always being that person who can bring to the table a compelling story, but one that is rooted in empirical data evidence.
And that's brilliant. And I love the fact that you were so political science. You went from political science to data. Well, that's quite a leap.
It was.
Yeah, and unless as a political scientist, it's not that difficult to make the leap into data science, because it's all about data, at the same time, really, isn't it?
For me, it was the fact that I saw people who were way smarter than I was or am, not struggling with the Foreign Service exam, and I said, well, then this is just not for me. I need to figure out some other path. But I was able to find something that speaks to me personally, professionally, something that seems to be well received by forward-thinking organizations. And so I'm really excited to be able to bring a perspective that combines sort of the critical thinking that one finds in something like political science.
Exactly.
But with elements, with empirical evidence, with data.
So do you think that as a political scientist, as having that base, and say if I'm finishing my degree at university, and I actually am studying data analytics, or I'm doing some kind of business analytics degree, or I'm doing computer science. What types of things would you suggest to that individual who wants to become a data scientist? 14 years in your career, but starting out very much, at that level where, oh my goodness, I really like this thing called data, but what do I need? to get there.
Right. Right.
What are the kinds
So
of attributes that you might, say right now, today, 14
mhm.
years on, qualify for being a really good data scientist?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I appreciate that because oftentimes people who are in my position don't get asked that question. But at the same time, we're trying to find appropriate candidates. We're trying to onboard new talent, et cetera. We're trying to make things better, and
Mm-hmm.
so it's always nice to be able to go back and say, well, if you're in this position right now, these are the things that I, as a hiring manager or someone who wants to work with you, would be looking for. So thank you for asking that. I would say that one thing is certainly critical thinking, and
Sure.
that's something that when I was in school working on political science, we spent a lot of time writing and using critical thinking to sort of deconstruct thoughts,
Mm-hmm.
or to take an audience from point A to point B to point C, so on and so forth, as opposed to sort of nonlinear thinking and jumping from A to Z at the very end. So critical thinking is certainly one of those things that I look for when I'm hiring data science
Mm-hmm.
talent. And the second is the ability to communicate, and that takes many different forms. And I don't want to say that there's only one way to communicate, that you should actually be focusing on one sort of mode. But communication takes forms of visualization. It takes forms of speaking. It takes forms of formal presentation, ballroom style. It takes the form of facilitating conversations and holding Q&A and critical listening and active listening.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
I think that's another skill that we absolutely look for when we're trying to bring somebody into our organization is that communication and their communication style, and making sure that it balances out with our with how we internally communicate.
Yeah. Yeah. But there's stories, and there's critical thinking, and there's the ability to communicate.
Mhm.
How important then, is it for me to come into the interview, come into my first day at the job, knowing every single R, Python, SQL, blah blah blah, all of these things? How important is that versus these softer skills?
Yeah, I would certainly put them as sort of tertiary.
Mm-hmm.
You need to be able to hold an intelligent conversation about a concept, but by and large, the every business that I've worked in has been materially different in so many
Yeah.
ways in terms of how they store their data, where they persist it, how you access it. But there are common themes that sort of stretch across every single position that I've ever been in, both from when I've been in junior roles to roles like I am now senior, when I've worked in finance,
Mm-hmm.
banking, when I've worked in real estate, and now working with theme parks and entertainment and hospitality. And what is sort of common across all of those is critical thinking skills, it is communication skills, it is the ability to convey your thoughts in a manner that is received by your audience
Mm-hmm.
and received
Mm-hmm.
well. It's the ability to influence by not
Yeah.
just what you know, but how you express
Mm-hmm.
what you know. And so, dickering about, well, should we be using linear regression here? Should we be using a
Yeah.
decision tree here? Should we be using some more, arcane, new cutting edge
Mm-hmm.
algorithm here?
Mm-hmm.
That takes up very little of our time. What we're usually talking about most of the time is, what is the business question? Do we really understand it completely?
Yeah.
Can we provide concrete examples that solve the business problem that we're trying to solve?
Mm-hmm.
That's where we start. And then we go figure out the algorithms, and well, are we going to use R? Are we going to use Python? Are we going to use this package? Are we going to use that
Yeah.
package? So
Yeah.
that is the tail of the big dog, which is critical thinking, communication, understanding a business partner, working with a business partner in a very influential way.
Yeah, and I think I love that, because I get asked so many times on LinkedIn, can you tell me what things I need
Mm,
to learn to become a data analyst or a data scientist? And I often do talk about the softer skills, and I never hear back from that person again, because I can always learn. Even I can always learn how to program. I can always
yeah.
learn that aspect of it. But actually sitting in front, and one thing that you mentioned about listening, that ability to listen and really
Mm,
understand and ask the questions at the right time is so key to
right.
getting the right outcome. And it's something that I'd like to explore in a little bit more with you, because you recently did a presentation. I think was it Fiesta? I think it was the
DDAC. We have a
DDAC.
Disney.
Okay.
Yep.
So it was a Disney conference, but the title of it was "Your organization wants analytics but needs insights." And in brackets, in parentheses, you said how to transition to insightful thinking.
Yeah.
So I just elaborate on that. What is your hypothesis around what's the thinking behind that? Because that packs a massive punch as a title.
Well, thank you. Thanks. I did a little stint in marketing, so I know how to, I know a couple of the tricks on how to, get eyeballs and pack a room at a
I need to learn from you. I need to learn from you.
I can tell you how not to do it as well. So something that I've noticed throughout my own professional career, and I've talked with peers. I talked to peers at different levels. I've talked to people in academia as well as in the more standard kind of industry, and one of the things that I have just kind of seen throughout the entire trajectory is it can be fairly easy to find technically oriented analytical talent, right? Like it's very easy to check off, you have this degree, you know this particular programming language, you know this particular algorithm. But at the end of the day, in most cases, most businesses, the businesses that I've worked with and the partners that I've worked with, that is a means to an end, right? And the end is what is generally referred to as insight, right? In my perspective, what they're going for when they use terms like insight is they want to make decisions better. They want to make them smarter. They want to minimize risk. They want to feel that out of the thousands of things that they could be doing at any particular decision point, fork in the road, that they're taking the best path that's going to yield the best result, however that's measured. It can be measured in many different ways. So it's not about, I need to use this particular algorithm, or it's, I need to know this programming language, or I need to, have SQL. It's more, I need to be able to help this decision maker feel confident in the decisions that they're making. And I need to give them sort of the unvarnished pros and cons to the different decisions that they can make, the different paths that they can take. And so in my experience, that's really what people want when they say they want insights. They want incremental knowledge that sort of changes or enhances their view of how the world works so that they can make better decisions. And that's what I think that most organizations are really looking for out of analytic talent.
Yeah, and I think that expression, I want to see the insights. And I think what you're saying is, tell me something that I don't already know. Yeah. Tell me something that I don't know about my business that is going to be a game changer. And that's going to allow me to either pivot or to think in a different, certainly from a commercial sense, because Walt Disney is absolutely commercial in that sense. And you said it before, parks, recreation, hospitality, the ecosystem that you work in is a really, really interesting one, because not only are you, you've got the theme park and you've got the hotel and you've got the whole experience. How do you connect all of that together and provide the insights that that the executive or the commercial individual needs to drive their part of the business? It must be fascinating.
It is fascinating. I mean, the psychology behind our guests, what we refer to as our customers, is our guests, the psychology behind our guests. And, I contrast it with where I was before I came to Disney. I worked for a large bank, and people certainly have very, they may have strong opinions about their financial institution. So insofar as, they want someone pleasant to speak with when they have a problem. They want to make sure that their money is safe and secure, that it's not going to get lost. And in the case of investments, they want to make sure that those investments are growing. But many of those things are by and large sort of objectives that they're going for. When you think about something like a brand such as Disney, whether it be the content that we put into our movies and into our television shows, when you think about the intellectual property that we have in our parks and the experiences, all the wonderful things that people can do in our parks around the world. When you think about the programming that we have on television, when you think about Disney streaming,
I mean,
so
it's
on and so
huge.
forth,
Yeah.
it is massive. And so people's objectives, what they value, what they want out of their relationship with our brand is a bit different from a financial institution
Yeah.
or a pharmaceutical company or
Absolutely.
their automotive selections, et cetera. And so we obviously want to be good stewards of that. But it's a very different psychology, and it takes a number of different teams working in collaboration with each other. Some on the harder, pure type of sciences. Some of those sciences may be operationally focused, so we have operations researchers and industrial engineers.
Okay.
We have consumer insight teams who are focusing on psychometrics and kind of keeping a pulse on our guest and consumer base. And then you've got folks like myself who are focused on what is it that can be done to drive the highest and greatest value out of our assets. So our intellectual property, our parks, our hotels, food and beverage, the merchandise that we sell, et cetera. So it is a whole symphony of different teams coming together to think about that problem and lend their particular voice, so that, again, our most senior, most executive decision makers can think through all the possible paths that they could take and come up with the ones that are securing the best experience for our guests, the best return for our shareholders, the best sort of working conditions and experience for our cast members, our employees. And that's hopefully what they're doing every single day.
So that sounds like a pretty complex ecosystem you've just talked about.
It is.
How do you orchestrate that? You talked about it being a symphony.
Yeah.
Being at the level where you're at, you're looking at this thing and saying, right, I may be dealing with transactional data today, and I may be dealing with that customer type of data, but then suddenly I'm dealing with streaming data, and suddenly I'm dealing with, I'm dealing with different types of data coming from every single direction, and I've got, the value piece which I need to deliver, because my commercial team are saying we need X, Y, and Z. But then you've got the engineers, you've got the sort of what did you call them? The industrial engineers and the sort of more scientific types. Yeah. And then you've got your data engineers, and then you've got your data scientists, and you've got BI people. And how are you orchestrating that so that you're absolutely being able to hit those goals and objectives?
Sure. So we rely very heavily upon our partners in technology, who help produce data platforms for us. And in many cases, they're also a consumer of these same products as well, these same sort of technology products as well, data products, so that they have a vested interest, because they have their own mandates for what it is they're trying to do. But it all sort of starts with the business question. What is it we're trying to answer? Are we trying to answer operationally focused types of questions, which may have a very different latency? Then are we trying to make finance decisions? Are we trying to make marketing decisions? These are all work off of very different cadences. So we try to start with what is the business need? What is the latency associated with that business decision?
Sure.
And then kind of work backwards from there. But always hand in hand with our technology teams, who are great at delivering technology products that have the data at the right cadence, and are exposing it to only the people who need to have access to it, putting those appropriate sort of safety and guardrails on top of them as well. So a lot of it is really driven by their expertise and their partnership.
And look, I know that there are ideal scenarios in every company around how teams work together, but what are some of the challenges that you've had to overcome within that? And I'm sure lots of people out there who will be listening to this will have similar challenges. So, it's just trying to piece that together and say, well, actually, this is how we got over it, and this is what we did. And it could be an IT challenge, it could be a data quality challenge, it could be a thinking, it could be a systemic problem. How do you kind of deal with those challenges?
Yeah. There certainly,
And you just pick
Disney's
a couple of examples. I know,
yeah.
this is a loaded question. Sorry.
Disney's not immune to that. I don't think there's
Yeah.
any organization is. I mean, I think, the ones that we think of when we think of, well, they must have everything solved. They must, have everything buttoned up. I'm sure even those organizations have their own moments of struggle at the very least. And Disney's no exception to that. But I think one of the sort of the back end of the sword for all the fantastic developments that have gone on in terms of data creation, data collection, algorithmic synthesis of those of that data, the computing power that we're seeing now compared to just even 5 years ago, 10 years ago.
Yeah.
The second edge to that particular sword is that there also seems to be a rise in the culture of, well, the data will solve my problem. The algorithm will solve my problem.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I talked about in my Disney Analytics conference talk was that I personally have never seen data in a database or a specific algorithm that actually created this thing that we call insight, right? Like insight is the end product of a factory of many different steps, some technology oriented, some data oriented, but just as many human and intuition and the cognitive processing that the power that we've got up here, that is as much a driver of insight than anything else. So I've certainly had experiences where someone says, well, you've got this database, you've got this degree in statistics, you've got this instance of Python, what more could you need?
You're in heaven, you're in utopia, you should just do it like that.
Absolutely. So it's like, well, can't you just build a model too?
Right.
Like that's not quite what a model is. So the one of the things that we regularly work with our partners on, who are maybe less data savvy, one of those things is just education on what is data, what can it do, what can it not do, what is statistics or machine learning or data science, what can it do, what can it not do, what things are not substitutes for critical thinking, what things are not substitutes for good problem definition. And so that is a problem that we run into regularly. The great thing is that Disney brings in people who are open and who want to learn, who are hungry for this type of
knowledge.
Exactly, knowledge. Thank you. And so it's great working with people and sort of like illuminating them on, I thought you could just do this, and this, and out pops my answer. It's going to be a little more complicated than that. And people are always super receptive to that.
Sure. And Disney, obviously, being the mammoth organization, that huge ecosystem that you have, would you be able to touch upon, without obviously giving any commercials away, would you be able to touch on some of the analytics, or give us some examples of what you might be doing that's really pushing what you want to do with that customer experience, and how you're going to help those guests have a much better time, or something else? It might be operational, it might be staffing or something like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Let me see if I can't come with at least one, if not two different examples. So I think as everybody realizes, we're in a very different situation here globally with COVID-19, the impact from that. And Disney Parks has not been immune to that whatsoever. And so something that we're focusing on at Walt Disney World, which is the site where I work and that I support down in Orlando, Florida, is this concept of making sure that our guests, when they visit our parks and our resorts, are safe, and that we abide by federal as well as state and local standards for health and safety and hygiene, et cetera. And we have, one of the cool things about Disney is that just about any job you can think of, we've probably got a person doing that. And so, we have more. So we have, chief medical officers, we have physicians on staff who are advising, et cetera. So, we listen to them as well. And so I can't get into all the details of it, but you can imagine that when you've got these 4 theme parks that just a year ago, it was sort of anybody who buys their ticket can come to the park, and we want them to explore the park, and we want them to feel like they're immersed in whether it be our fantasy land that has a certain theme, or our adventure land has a certain theme, or the World Showcase within Epcot, which has its own sort of theming, etc. We want them to feel like they are in a different world, in a world that's safe, and a world where they can kind of leave a lot of the outside world outside. It's different today, and so we need to be respectful not just of the ideals of Disney in terms of our storytelling and the immersiveness and the wonderful experiences, but we also need to make sure that our cast are safe, that our guests are safe, that we are abiding by those various standards. And so the process by which we manage our parks now is very different from how we thought about the operations of our parks just a year ago. So ensuring that we can keep things clean and that we can keep guests at least 6 feet apart from each other, et cetera, is a fascinating undertaking. I'm disappointed that we live in a world where we have to do that type of work.
Yeah.
But at the same time, as a data scientist, it's a fascinating new data set and a new set of problems for someone like myself, or our industrial engineers and our operations researchers, and many more help solve. So getting people in the parks, getting them in there safely, keeping them distanced, making sure that our cast members are also equally safe and healthy, et cetera, is a fascinating data science problem.
It must be, because you've got a lot of spatial kind of factors there as well, haven't you? You know, I know that your guests wear these types of sensor-based
magic
wristbands. Oh, magic bands, you call them? Okay.
Yeah, we call them magic bands. So they absolutely. So that's I've got one here.
All right.
So their guests are certainly not required to use or interact with these, but we find that many of our guests do. They are RFID based, and it allows for both short range as well as long range interactions with physical assets to create digital sort of moments. So for, just at from a very operational perspective, this can be your token to enter your park, so that you don't necessarily have to fish out of your wallet a physical piece of media, a ticket, basically. This can operate as that. Same thing for our resort guests when they want to pay for merchandise or pay for their food and beverage, or just get a water, etc. This can be linked to their resort folio charge account.
Okay.
And they can just have this, so they don't necessarily have to carry around again, a credit card or a gift card, etc. This can function as that particular token. It's also used for the cooler things, the things that I much more like to point out is sort of personalized moments and interactions that are cues that we have at some of our attractions. For example, so when a guest is in the line for our Expedition Everest attraction, which is at Disney's Animal Kingdom, it's themed around Everest and the abominable snowman or the Yeti. When the guests are in queue, there are sensors. I can tell you where they are, but they're sensors within the queue infrastructure.
Sure.
That can sense that Samir has his magic band on. And Samir has sort of with his own digital online account with Disney, and as an optional convenience, what we'll do is we'll change some of the signage within the queue to reflect Samir. So there may be a digital sign promoting a particular fictitious, of course, product. Snow boots or something like that, and it will say, these are the warmest snow boots I've ever worn, says Samir. So as guests are going through the queue, they get just little kind of Easter eggs that are all predicated on being able to correctly identify that the guest is there and where the guest is. So I can't talk much more about it.
No. I'm fascinated by that, though. But it's, I mean, look, that is hyper personalization that you're talking about.
It is.
That is absolutely in the moment. Slightly, sort of was it Minority Report? Or was it? I don't mean to. But No. What was the other one where,
Uh,
as you walk past the advertising horde?
oh, that was Minority
Oh, it
Report.
was,
Yeah,
yeah. And then they sort
yeah.
of pick up on your eyes, and suddenly
Hmm.
they've got something for you. So it's,
Yes, yes,
and that's a lot of data that you're absolutely gathering right there, the
correct.
streaming, the sensor data, and so on. So are those real time decisions that you're then passing back to somebody as well? So from an operational perspective, I've got this band, and suddenly it could be the eyeball effect as well. Maybe I'm overdoing it, right? But you've got a finite amount of staff within the COVID related world,
Mhm.
and suddenly a lot of rides are backing up. People are backing up in queues. Is that
Mhm.
also one of the use cases that you're using the wristband for, to manage operationally the park? So, as you say, the work, that the sort of flow of people around it is easier and effective, and people aren't bumping into each other and so on. That's a pretty big task in of itself.
It is, and the great thing is that we've had people, we have people who are operating our parks and resorts who've been doing so for
Mm,
decades. So
mm,
they've got experience doing this under varying different conditions. They have experience doing this with various different technologies. You know, very minimal technology versus what we might have today through things like sensor based, things like camera based, etc. And what's great is that those people are really, really good at what they do at managing these parks.
mm-hmm.
And what we're finding, though, as I'm sort of a latecomer into this because I don't come from an operational background, but what's great to see is that when you give those extremely capable operators additional data, like the
Right.
ones that we're talking about,
Yep.
they're able to make much better decisions, and they're able to sort of squeeze much better efficiencies out of our assets. And
Mm-hmm.
then on the other side of the spectrum, not from the operational, but more from the guest experiential perspective, we're absolutely able to give guests a better experience. We're able to, today, something that we can do that we couldn't do 10 years ago through the implementation of mobile applications, through the implementation of a Wi-Fi network on property, through the implementation of sensor-based things like the Magic Bands, is that we can tell guests, regardless of where they are technically in the world, what are the wait times right now at Walt Disney World, so that I'm not,
Wow.
taking my family in 100-degree heat,
Yeah.
across a park, which can be a very long distance, particularly for the little ones, and finally finding out, oh, this line is longer than I want to wait right now.
Mm-hmm.
So with the introduction of our mobile application and My Magic Plus, we're able to now tell somebody, don't go across the park to see what the line is like. This is what it is right now. We've also introduced enhancements to our virtual queue type process. So we're able to keep people out of a queue.
Right. Okay.
The technology is allowing us to have a virtual queue, and you've probably seen this at some of your local restaurants, perhaps. So it's not a completely new innovation, but our guests certainly appreciate. I'd rather go spend my time in, maybe in the shop, or maybe interacting with a character, maybe taking photos, etc., rather than waiting in this queue that every few minutes moves forward, every few minutes moves forward. Again, health, safety, operational efficiency, but
Mm-hmm.
also giving the guests a great experience, keeping them out of lines. And it's through this data, it's through this sensor network, it's
Yeah.
through this technology, it's through this partnership that I've talked about, that we're able to do these things both for our own assets as well as for the customers who are so generous with their time and money by visiting us.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's fantastic. I mean, that must be an exciting job, just to be there and seeing it and doing it, which is phenomenal. You mentioned something earlier, which I really want to pick up on,
Yeah.
and that's storytelling.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a very, I think, a tough thing to sort of
Hmm.
be able to do. Um, Certainly, with data, I think it's a very, very tough uh, uh, message to convey. And actually, you mentioned it earlier that you'd been in marketing, so you've obviously got a talent to with words and to convey a message. What is the core of storytelling for you as a
Hmm.
data scientist?
Wow. I don't think I've ever been asked that question. I probably haven't put conscious thought to it. So you're
Okay,
probably
I'll
going to
give you a
stop me on
moment.
this one. But the first thing that comes to mind is empathy.
Okay.
I think empathy is lacking in a lot of facets of our lives, but
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
certainly when it comes to storytelling. Because
Yeah.
why am I telling a story? Um, from a data perspective, usually what I'm trying to do is, again, I'm trying to help somebody make a decision that they didn't feel um, confident, comfortable, knowledgeable enough to sort of make on their own. So I need to have empathy for the problem that they're in, the problem that they're trying to solve. And so one of the things, for example, that when I talk to clients, is I ask them, what keeps you up at night? What are the things that, professionally, of course, what is it that what is it that you're just really unable to solve? What is the question that keeps coming back? What is it that you're being measured on?
Mm-hmm.
At the end of the year, what is your leader going to say? You were successful because you accomplished X, Y, Z. What does your leader care about? And having empathy for the position that we're all humans and they're just trying to solve a problem. They're trying to do something a little bit better than they did yesterday. They're trying to overcome this rub that they've just had in their professional life for 5, 10, 15 years. And if I have empathy, then I'm going to probably bring my best self to the solution.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Because I'm going to make sure that the solutions that I bring are tailor made to the language that they speak in, that it's going to be something that is actionable, right? That's a qualifier we always put on our insight. It's got
Sure.
to be an actionable insight.
Yep.
If I tell you that, left-handed people always behave this way and right-handed people always behave this other way, if you can't take any action off
With it.
of
Yeah.
handedness, then it's of no use. So having that empathy for the position they're in and what their limitations are helps me craft a much better solution for them. And having that information also helps me tell the story in such a way that it speaks to them, it resonates to them.
Mm-hmm.
Some people I work with, they want to know about some of the nitty gritty things. They want to know, the proverbial R square of this particular,
Oh boy.
logistic regression
Oh
sorry, a
gosh.
linear regression that you built. Fine, you want to talk in that language? Totally fine talking with you in that language. Other people say, how do I sell more stuff to more people at a higher price?
Yep.
Different conversations. And so I'm going to tell very different stories when I'm talking
Absolutely.
with those clients. So
Yeah.
having empathy and taking the time to understand the values, what I refer to oftentimes as the currency of the
Mm-hmm.
partner that you're working with,
Mm-hmm.
helps make for a much better story.
I love that. I love that. And I've never heard that before around the values or the currency. And I understand what you're saying. What are their goals? What do they need to achieve at the end of their year or month or quarter or whatever it might be?
Right.
But absolutely being able to pin what you do from a data perspective and blend it with their narrative of what they need to go and say to others. And I think that's what you're sort of, and I haven't heard it like that, said like that before. I've heard it very much said, yes, if you have the PowerPoint like this and you provide the report like that and blah, blah, blah. But actually this, I love that, the values and currency piece. I really do. So that brings me on to another point, actually.
Mm-hmm.
There's this big and huge word within the data industry right now, and that's data literacy. Is that something that has raised its hairy head at Disney, and is that something that is talked about as we're really data illiterate, or we need to get over this? Is that something that exists in that way?
I will say that that's not a specific term that we're using right now. That's not to say that we're not representing that same concept in a different way.
Yeah.
If I can, I'm probably going to project my own shortcomings onto that particular question, but
okay,
I think
no problem.
one of the when I hear a term like data literacy, I think what kind of comes to mind is trying to understand the limitations of what we refer to as as data, right? Like data is one of those things. Information is another one. Insight is another one that, depending upon who you're talking to, it kind of means something a little bit different.
Sure.
So what I prefer to do, and maybe this is a way of helping to improve data literacy or minimize data illiteracy,
Mm-hmm.
is I try to talk about the data in terms of its effects, what it can do, what it can't do, what I believe it can answer, what I feel that it will
I
fall
see.
short on.
I see.
And I think as part of that, one of the questions that we do often ask ourselves in terms of the scientific circles that I work in within the organization is, if I have something that maybe I'm not 100% confident in, there's some error around it, or maybe there's a possibility of a misunderstanding of a particular data element, what we try to do is ask ourselves, if we follow this conclusion, will it make things better, or will it make things worse?
Mm-hmm.
And so, it's first that sort of physician do no harm type of thing. If we feel that, that something may be inaccurate, or we may have a misunderstanding, and we act off of that, do we feel that there is still, that we're going to make things worse? Because in many cases, you can have quote unquote bad data. You can have a quote unquote poor model, or you can have a quote unquote misunderstanding of what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
But you're not really going to hurt anything if you take an action off of that. So we ask ourselves a lot, are we going to make things worse by following this conclusion? And we're wrong. So we're thinking about, in terms of the data scientists, we're talking about our type 1 and our type 2 errors. That's what these things are. Is
Okay.
what is the cost of being wrong? What
Mm-hmm.
is the outcome, or what is the advantage of being right? So I think if I were to start to introduce a concept around something called data literacy, it would really focus a lot on those aspects of data. Where is it going to help us? Where is it going to hurt us?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I don't think I gave you a great answer there,
No,
but
no,
that's
no.
my perspective.
Do you know what? I'm actually that's a really good answer, because one of the not struggles, but one of the things that I'm continuously seeing is that everybody's saying that we're all data illiterate. 95% of finance teams are data illiterate. Leaders are data illiterate, and blah blah blah. But actually, what you've just said to me is, those guys really don't know what they don't know. Yeah, they don't know what is in that data. They don't know what can happen or what you can do with that data. And what you're saying to me is, I'm going to explain that to them, because I'm the experienced one, and I can speak in a way that is going to convey my understanding of the current situation of the data that we have, however, whatever quality basis there is in that data. And then I'm going to say, well, with this, we can do X, and you can have that outcome. And that may well help you, as you said, or it might, and I have to look at the hurt aspect as well. So I think that's actually really interesting, because do you find that drives a different conversation with your business partner? And
It
what
does.
types of feedback do you get from that as a data scientist?
Sure, it absolutely does. Because when you start to frame it in the concept of risk and reward, people's mindsets often, they tend to grasp that a bit more. And there is this sort of cognitive bias that almost all humans have, which is this like risk aversion, right? Like we'd much rather put our eggs in the risk aversion basket than in the reward basket for the most part. Right. And so when you start framing it in terms of risk and reward, or what is the consequence of being right here? What is the consequence of being wrong here? What if we misuse this data or use it in a way that it shouldn't be used? Then their way of thinking tends to sharpen, I have found.
Okay.
And in many cases, granted, I'm in a great position in that where I sit, very few of the decisions that I help support are going to result in somebody actually, being hurt, or, a safety issue, or somebody losing their entire checking account, those types of things. I get it. I work for a theme park, right? Like, so I have a very different set of, a very different risk profile than someone who may be in the pharmaceutical field, or someone who may be in the finance field, et cetera. But that aside, what we often find lots of times is that the cost of being wrong is minimal. And we find that we're willing to make this decision. We're willing to take this this particular recommendation simply because if we don't, we're really not any worse off than if we do, and we happen to have made a misstep.
Because you're not learning about that, are you then? And I guess that's
Exactly.
the whole part of innovation, that you've got to have that level of trust in doing something wrong to learn, something more about it, or about the situation or the model or whatever it might be. But just to go back to that ecosystem, because something touched, that you touched upon right there, and was about innovation. Disney has always been seen as an innovative company, from the 1920s, when Mickey was born, and how that came out into certainly my childhood and my memories. How is innovation captured in the essence of Disney and the parks? How do you have a safe space somewhere to play around and to do that innovation with, or do you have hackathons? Do you get together, or is there a hub somewhere? How do you nurture that spirit of innovation?
Yes, and yes, all those things. And so that's one of the reasons why it's a really cool place to be. And I wouldn't say that there is a cookie cutter, every team approaches it the same way, every segment approaches it the same way. But I will say that there is 100% a culture of, we want to do things differently, with a set of well-established values and principles from which everything derives. So we have what we refer to as the 5 keys, and that sort of guides everything from a top level perspective. And it's safety, courtesy, show, efficiency, and diversity. So we work off of those particular principles. And what's great is that our senior leaders have come to us and regularly say, the way we're doing things is great for now, but that's not necessarily how we want to do things tomorrow. What can you do to do things differently tomorrow? Josh tomorrow, who is the chairman of our particular segment, just recently put out a video for all of our cats, where he really challenged us to think through doing our business differently. And I think, I can't remember exactly where I heard it, but the definition of innovation to me, and again, I'm stealing this from somebody else, is that it's changing before you have to. And that's cool. That's what Josh's message was to us, was let's change our parks before we have to, whatever that means. So, we've been successful here at Walt Disney World in launching our new Park Pass park inventory management system. So again, that's sort of the underpinning reservation system that's making sure that we're keeping people distanced and we're not overloading the parks, et cetera. That's something that we didn't have 12 months ago, but yet we stood that up. We stood that up over the summer in a matter of a few months, and that's that's just kind of one example of changing when we had to. But we need to start thinking about that in terms of other aspects of our organization. And so the way we encourage that type of thinking is certainly through all the things that you just mentioned about creating safe spaces for people to have ideas that challenge the status quo,
right?
And making sure that it's not, we don't hear responses of, but that's not how we've done things, so we're not going to accept that, right? Like we've been running parks since 1955.
Sure.
Some things can stay the same, but many things need
have to change. Yeah.
The concept of queues, like what we have to have queues. Should we be having queues? Things like that.
Oh, so if you're in England, it's good to have a queue.
Yeah, absolutely. So we definitely need to make sure that our UK visitors are in a comfortable space.
Exactly.
As well.
Personalize it for me, please.
That could be the next attraction. It's the queue to get into the queue, and so it's just a bunch of British people kind of standing in the line and saying,
just meandering and chatting, and it's perfect.
So we absolutely do things like hackathons. We have various innovation and incubation type of programs as well.
Mm-hmm.
The company as a whole has an incubation program where we invite people to come and showcase what can you do.
Sure.
And some great things have come out of that. For example, we acquired a company that participated and was a finalist in one of those programs, BAMTech, and that is now the underpinning for Disney Plus, our streaming
Oh,
service.
wow. Okay.
So it's not just a matter of sort of performative, oh, that's cute, you built a nice thing.
Yeah.
It's no, we want to see what you can do. Push the envelope, show us things that we can't do. And if we think that there's value in that, we'll put our money where our mouth is, and we'll do that.
That's awesome.
So there are definitely real tangible benefits to this culture of innovation. That just happens to be one of the most obvious ones.
Yeah, sure. So we're coming to the end of the show, and I want to ask you one final question. Sure. I can't remember way back when it was, but the data scientist was seen as the most sexiest job of the 21st century. Yeah. Where do you think the job of the data scientist is going to be in the next 5 years, maybe 10 years? You've seen that over time now. How you've seen how it's changed. Where do you think it's going?
That's a great question, and I wish I were prescient. I tend to always fall short on these types of things. Like I don't have a great eye for it, but maybe I could talk a little bit about kind of where I hope it goes.
Hope it goes. Absolutely. Yeah.
Instead, so I could take that. I want the data science as much as I have data science in my title, and I want it to be recognized and sometimes put on a little bit of a pedestal. Look, at the end of the day, it is problem solving to help make decisions better. That's what a data scientist in my world is meant to do. And so I'm hoping that we kind of blend into the fabric, and we're not seen as a sort of all-in-one, all-encompassing, can do it all type of role, where it's just feed in a question, out comes $1 million in revenue, or whatever it is you're trying to maximize, because that's unrealistic. Yeah. Right. What I want to see is maybe back to that concept of data literacy is a more general, amongst the general partners that we work with, a slightly elevated understanding and respect for what data is, but as much as that what it is not, and then help bring us into their world, where they share with us, again, what are their pains, what are their struggles, what's not working well, and we can start to have conversations where it's not, I've got a problem, make it better. Sure. But we can have a conversation of explaining, well, what is that problem? Why do you see that as a problem? When you say make it better, what do you mean by better? And we can have a conversation with a common language that allows us on the data science side to say, I know of some data like that, or let me go do some exploration on some data like that, or I know of some approachable algorithms or solutions or visualizations or whatever it happens to be. They don't need to be experts in that, but I would like to see a bit more of an integration where there is not this sort of mysticism about data science, and we're just seen as other people who we just want to make things better. Right? Yeah, that's what I want to do. I want my leaders to have the confidence of their decisions. I want them to understand the risk and rewards of the different options that are in front of them. I want them to feel convinced that we have turned over every important stone that there is. And so I think the data scientist will no longer be this mythical wizardy thing. And it will just be, these are smart people who want to make things better and want us to be more effective. And so that's kind of how the data scientist will be seen. I don't think that was a great answer, but that's I know.
I think it was brilliant, because it actually blends it more into a seamless asset to the business. It's more ingrained in the business. It doesn't necessarily have to be, as you said, oh my goodness, there's that magician over there, they're going to make us do amazing things. And I that is completely wrong. I think what you've said is brilliant, because it is about the decision making or the actions or the outcomes, and basically you're just helping them navigate to that point and giving them a helping hand. So actually, it's a great answer. I wasn't looking for this, Nostradamus, the data scientist will be,
Right.
sitting on a plinth somewhere and being able to, visualize into the future. No, I think the practical and pragmatic things are what I like about the answer, and that's fantastic. Listen, Andrew Wright, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you on the show. And just the last bit, where can people find you if they want to get in contact with you and ask you to come onto their show, or just ask you some questions, or get a job at Disney?
Well, good job at Disney, man. Yeah, if trust me, if I were in the workforce right now trying to get a job at Disney, I think I would be, I'm not sure I would even hire myself.
Oh, goodness.
But I think one way that people can reach me is certainly through LinkedIn.
Yeah.
Andrew Wright. I have an M because there are a billion Andrew Wrights
I'm sure.
in the world. Yeah, so I'm Andrew M. Wright. I am certainly at Disney. Please feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'd be more than happy to connect with you, talk with you about your various problems. I love talking about this type of stuff. As you can see, I will go on ad infinitum. I've got a few posts out there. I'm not super chatty on LinkedIn. I read a lot. I'm much more of a lurker. Mm-hmm. But I do have a few posts on there, particularly focused on what are insights, how to create insights, the scientific method. Those are things that I walk every day in my life. And so those are the things that I really like to emphasize when people are asking me, how do I think about a problem? How do I tackle a problem? What do I need to be learning? I'm going to always come back to those things, but please feel free to connect with me. And I'd be happy to talk with you about anything.
And I think you'll probably talk to them about chicken nuggets as well, wouldn't you?
Absolutely. Yeah, nuggets factor in very heavily in my last speech
yes.
at DDAX. So yeah, I would
which
love
I didn't get to
about...
see, but I certainly read and saw the pictures of very many chicken nuggets being dipped into sauce. So
Absolutely. Aren't we all just looking for nuggets? Like at the end of the day, you walk into meetings, so like just give us the nuggets. We want the nuggets. So that's kind of where this came
and the
from.
golden ones. Well, look, it's been an absolute pleasure, and I've really enjoyed speaking to you. So
thank you so much, Samir. I appreciate the time.
Thank you. Yeah. I really do appreciate it. Take care. Have a good day.
Cheers. You
Bye.
too.